All right, everyone, the bullshitters at the New York Times, which is, there's no other word for it at this point, the propagandists, the yellow journalists, the would-be muckrakers, if there were any muck to actually rakers at the New York Times, have come out with a real doozy here, which is, the FISA Memo, hashtag release the memo, that evil Russian plot to destroy the West by bringing government transparency, I guess. Yeah, they're saying that it's a conspiracy theory now. Oh, it's just a conspiracy that the FISA courts would authorize, surveillance on a political campaign, or that the FISA system abuses anyone. Now, that's funny, because when mass surveillance was exposed under George W., and at the time we had no idea that it was nearly as pervasive as we now know in the wake of Snowden, and certainly revelations since Snowden. At the time, I seem to remember all of these outlets raking George Bush over the coals about the necessity of actually conducting surveillance. It took him a while to win them over. Because at first, with the Patriot Act, it's just basically, yeah, we're going to spy on them evil terrorists, them Arabs over there that want to do more 9/11s. And so they shut up and they said, okay, that makes sense, because the government's so benevolent and so efficient at doing so. Just ignore Katrina and the FEMA response there. Don't worry about this group that's actually tasked with us recovering from any such disaster, radiological event or a chemical weapon bombing or something. Don't worry about the fact that it can take them days to do bullshit. That's not worrisome at all. But then, over time, as he lost more of his political capital, they began getting wary, and then, of course, you have WikiLeaks at the time. This is back when George W. was president, showing, yeah, there's like abuse in Iraq, there's abuse in surveillance, the Bush administration's slimy. They're not all this apple pie and grandma on the rocking chair stuff that they portray themselves as, hyper-patriotic, and, we love the U.S. more than anyone, and Jesus, too, and he was an American and had an AK-47. And that turned out not to be the case. Then, over time, that surveillance that they, at the time, had a problem with, they stopped talking about it. And then post-Snowden, they're like, oh, well, Edward Snowden's a traitor, because Obama was the president at the time. And it does boil down to the partisan in that case, but now it's gone beyond that, because now the Bushes and Obamas of the world, that they treated in such a differential manner at the time, are both on the same side against Trump, who now is the big boogeyman, and Trump's allies, and it's very funny, but here's the thing. If you actually think that releasing this memo is a bad thing, your mind has been totally scrambled. It's been scrambled because you've essentially taken up the idea that you don't need to know the truth for partisan reasons because the people calling for the truth you see as being bad. That's essentially what you've come to the conclusion of. Don't you understand how that makes you sound? How moronic that really is, or you think that it's a Russian conspiracy, so you're like, oh, Russia's involved? Well, I guess I don't need to know the truth then, because the benevolent government would never lie to me. That's funny, you think the government is led by Orange Hitler, and yet you're going to trust the government and its word on what the FISA memo does or does not contain. You got half of Congress, yes, largely along partisan lines, albeit telling you that you probably should see this memo because it's concerning. And there are people who say, no, we don't want to see the memo. It's good for the government to keep lots of secrets from the population. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's just totally out there. And then the fake news New York Times says it's a conspiracy theory. You're a conspiracy. You wear a tinfoil hat if you think that people should have a transparent government. That's funny, because the media itself has been arguing for transparency in the Trump White House and complaining loud and long about the fact that he won't give you an interview. So what about the FISA stuff? Look, you want Trump to sign off and extend FISA. Don't you want to know whether that program can be abused by the President of the United States, since you hate Trump so much? Oh, are you worried because it'll show that the one actually abusing it was probably Barack Obama, or maybe Hillary Clinton got involved somehow? Partisan nonsense. And it's obvious why. At this point, the Democrats, in the last election at least, were the only ones getting donations largely from the corporate groups associated with groups like CNN and the New York Times. So they're sort of all in it together. The bank, the corporate apparatus, the legacy media, and the establishment politicians, they're all on one core of money sucking off one another. Trump is on the other side, meanwhile. He had a campaign, astonishingly, and for a Republican even more astonishing, historically speaking, over the last half-century. His campaign was predominantly financed by small donations and by loans he gave to his own presidential campaign in expectation of winning. He took very little corporate money, and what he did, he didn't really solicit. He didn't do the Goldman Sachs, what was it, $10,000 a plate giveaway like Hillary Clinton had to do, and then come out and whine that the DNC didn't give her enough money when the DNC was helping bundle funds through straw men in order to fund her campaign even more by rich people who were donating more than the capped limit to a presidential campaign. How wonderful. You know, that's still an ongoing legal case. I bet anything that they try to hush it up, but then they end up settling out for an enormous sum. You know, the DNC up here in Vermont went broke in the wake of the election. I wonder why. Were they taking a lot of money that they got from wealthier individuals and bundling it for the Clintons? Bet probably they were. The New York Times is full of shit, though. It's fake news. But then again, they have been. It's not just, some people think that it's only since Trump started his campaign that this has been a problem. The media's always been full of shit. It's always been spewing propaganda. It's been like that for a long time. Look, you remember the Iraq War era. Well, look, there are media orders that said, oh, just ignore the death toll, ignore that we're not accomplishing anything, ignore the cost in lives or money, ignore that, you know, we're not even sure why we're friggin' there in the first place. Just ignore all that. You're an evil traitor if you don't support George Bush and his war of terror. That's basically what it boiled down to. It's propaganda. It's nonsense. There were people in the wake of Snowden. Don't look at the actual NSA leaks here because China and Russia want you to read them and then think that the U.S. government's abusive towards the Constitution. Well, it is. Doesn't fucking matter, you know, you're shooting the messenger at that point. Another propaganda strategy. Shooting the messenger has become quite common. Oh, there's some flaw in the character of this person arguing for transparency. Therefore, transparency itself is a bad thing. It's sort of like Hitler drank milk, so you're a Nazi if you drink milk. It's basically the same concept, which spawns its own little joke there with regards to the milk meme. But yeah, FISA Gate's a big problem. The memo should be released. It should also be completely unredacted when it's released. That would be preferable. Now then, if the government did nothing wrong, well, they have nothing to hide. Now, this is what the New York Times told us for a year after Snowden revealed his stuff. Oh, don't worry about mass surveillance. If you didn't do anything wrong, who cares if everyone, you know, who cares if a bunch of random people in intelligence agencies can basically pick through everything you've ever sent via a cell phone? That's okay because you're an upstanding citizen. What are you worried about? You must have some baggage in your past. We should check through your trash to make sure that you're 100% loyal to Führer Obama. That's what it boiled down to, and it was bullshit at the time. They do the same thing all the time. Well, then why don't we apply that to the government? Look, if the FISA memo is just a conspiracy theory, if there's nothing really that bad in it, just release it then. Well, there's nothing that bad in it. It doesn't need to be redacted. It shouldn't be confidential or classified or anything. Just release it. That's all you have to do. You know, you should just print out. Trey Gowdy should go in there. Get it, put it on a scanner, and then take some copies, post them around DC, and send them off to some interesting commentators. You know what they should do? If the Trump White House really wanted to troll people, they would start sending out press releases to people that are like on YouTube or on blogs and stuff. And they would do that like without any knowledge on the behalf of the legacy media. Just line up a week's reporting, and then everyone can scoop them and really crush them under. That'd be so funny. It'd be a good strategy, too. More people would pay attention to it. It'd be novel. It'd be the logical next step from scooping them yourself, basically, on Twitter. But no, the FISA memo is not a conspiracy theory. The memo exists. It is claimed to be worrisome by half of the U.S. Congress. And trust me, Congress usually doesn't want transparency in any way, shape, or form. When they're telling you need to see something, you need to see it. It's not Russian. It is a memo showing that there was apparently some level of abuse within the FISA program at the highest levels of the U.S. government. That's what it appears to show. It should be released, absolutely. Unless the New York Times wants to come out and say, well, we have so much respect for the government, we don't expect them to even tell us what's going on. They should operate in a totally autonomous fashion. They should have absolute leeway to do whatever they want because we know they would never violate anyone's rights. Never happen. Oh, free speech zones, what are those? Disarmament, what's that? 10th Amendment? Oh, who needs that stuff? The New York Times is full of shit. That's about all. Peace out.